I'm Sophie Williams, 47 years old, and 6 months ago, my entire world imploded when my younger sister showed up to my wedding wearing my custom-made wedding dress. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't breathe, but what my family did next was even worse. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or wondered if blood really makes someone family, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this kind of pain. I met Marcus at a bookstore cafe in downtown Portland 12 years ago. Not one of those trendy places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, but a cramped little shop that smelled like old paper and vanilla candles. He was sitting in the philosophy section, completely absorbed in a worn copy of Meditations, occasionally pushing his glasses up his nose in this absent-minded way that made my heart skip. I'd gone there to escape another family dinner where my mother spent 2 hours praising my sister Isabel's latest promotion, while somehow forgetting I'd just been named partner at my architecture firm. When Marcus looked up and caught me staring, he didn't smile right away. Instead, he held up his book and said, "Have you ever noticed how Marcus Aurelius basically invented the self-help genre 2,000 years ago?" That unexpected observation, delivered with such genuine curiosity, hooked me instantly. Our first 5 years together felt like building something sacred brick by brick. Marcus worked as a philosophy professor at the local community college, teaching ethics and critical thinking to students who often arrived believing they already knew everything. I'd come home from 14-hour days designing sustainable housing complexes to find him grading papers at our kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and half-eaten sandwiches. We developed this ritual where every Friday night, no matter how exhausted we were, we'd cook together, him chopping vegetables with mathematical precision while I improvised sauces based on whatever we had in the fridge. Our apartment filled with the sounds of sizzling garlic and whatever jazz album he'd discovered that week. We learned each other's languages slowly, carefully, like archaeologists uncovering something precious. He taught me to pause before reacting, to examine my assumptions. I showed him how to trust his instincts, to stop overthinking every decision until it became paralyzed. By year 8, we'd reached what I now think of as our golden period. We'd saved enough for a small house in the Mount Tabor neighborhood, nothing fancy but with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and he could read in the shade of an old oak tree. Our mornings started with coffee on the back porch, watching the neighborhood cats patrol their territories while we planned our days. I'd been promoted to senior partner and was leading a project to design affordable housing that actually felt like homes, not just boxes to warehouse people. Marcus had published his first book about practical philosophy for modern life, and students would stop us at farmers markets to tell him how his classes had changed their perspectives. We hosted dinner parties where our friends would linger until midnight, discussing everything from urban planning to ancient wisdom over bottles of reasonably priced wine. I felt settled in a way I'd never experienced in my childhood home, where love always came with conditions and attention had to be earned through achievements that were never quite enough. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs scattered like breadcrumbs through those happy years. The way my mother's voice would shift when she talked about Isabel, softer, warmer, like honey coating every word. How family photos always seemed to feature Isabel in the center, even when it was supposedly my celebration. The pattern of forgotten birthdays and missed accomplishments that I'd trained myself to laugh off. "Oh, Mom," I'd tell Marcus when she forgot to mention my promotion at Thanksgiving but spent 20 minutes describing Isabel's new haircut. "She's just scattered." Marcus would give me this look, equal parts sympathy and frustration, but he knew better than to push. He understood that admitting my family's indifference would mean acknowledging a pain I'd spent 40 years avoiding. The catalyst that changed everything started on an ordinary Tuesday morning in March. Marcus and I had been engaged for 6 months, planning a small wedding for late September when the Pacific Northwest weather would be perfect. Crisp air, changing leaves, golden afternoon light. I was sketching potential venues in my notebook while he made breakfast, debating between the Japanese garden and a small vineyard in the Willamette Valley. The smell of scrambled eggs and sourdough toast filled our kitchen as morning sun streamed through the windows. We were discussing whether 60 guests was too many when my phone rang. My sister's photo flashed on the screen, one from 5 years ago because she rarely sent current ones. I almost didn't answer, knowing she only called when she needed something, but Marcus encouraged me with a gentle nod. "Hey, Isabel," I said, trying to keep the wariness out of my voice. "What's going on?" "Oh my God, Sophie, you're not going to believe this." Her voice had that breathless quality that usually preceded drama. "Ryan proposed last night, at the Space Needle. There were fireworks and everything." I felt my stomach drop even as I forced enthusiasm into my voice. "That's wonderful. Congratulations." Marcus watched my face carefully as Isabel launched into a 15-minute monologue about the ring, the proposal, the way strangers had applauded. Not once did she ask about my engagement or our wedding plans. When she finally paused for breath, I made the mistake of mentioning our September date. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. September? She finally said, her voice shifting to something harder. But that's only 6 months away. I need at least a year to plan. You'll have to change your date. I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. Isabel, we've already put deposits down. We've been engaged for 6 months. The save the dates went out last month. Another pause, then her voice turned syrupy sweet in a way that made my skin crawl. But Sophie, you know how important this is to me. I'm only going to get married once. Can't you just postpone? I mean, you and Marcus have been together forever anyway. What's another year? I looked at Marcus, who was shaking his head slowly, his jaw tight. I'm not postponing my wedding, I said firmly. You can pick any other date. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there holding the phone, feeling like I'd just been ambushed in my own kitchen. Marcus wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he whispered. But my hands were already shaking, because I knew my family well enough to know this was just the beginning. 3 hours later, my mother called. I was in the middle of a client presentation about sustainable building materials when my phone lit up with her contact photo, one where she was looking at Isabel, not the camera. I sent it to voicemail, but she called again immediately, and again. My client, a kind woman in her 60s, noticed my distress and suggested we take a break. I stepped onto the balcony of the conference room, downtown Portland spread below me like a promise of normalcy. I was about to lose. Sophie. My mother's voice was ice cold before I could even say hello. How dare you upset your sister on the happiest day of her life? I gripped the balcony railing, focusing on the physical sensation of cold metal against my palms. Mom, I didn't upset anyone. I just told her we couldn't change our wedding date. You've always been selfish, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Always making everything about you. Your sister is younger. She should get married first. It's tradition. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Since when had our family cared about tradition? I'm 37, Mom. If we waited for Isabel to get married first, I might never get married at all. The words came out before I could stop them. Years of frustration compressed into one sentence. The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. If you don't change your date, my mother said slowly, each word deliberate as a blade, don't expect any of us to come. I don't remember ending the call or walking back into the conference room. I must have finished the presentation somehow, because the client hired us. But the rest of that day exists in fragments. Marcus finding me in my office at 8 p.m., still staring at the same blueprint. The way my hands shook as I tried to explain what happened. How he held me while I finally let myself cry. Years of minimized pain, flooding out in his arms. We don't need them, he kept saying. We have each other. We have our real family. But even as I nodded against his chest, part of me couldn't believe it would really come to this. Surely, I thought, surely my own mother wouldn't miss my wedding over something so petty. The next few weeks taught me how naive that hope was. My phone became a battlefield of text messages, each one a new attempt at manipulation. My Aunt Clara, who hadn't spoken to me in 2 years, suddenly felt compelled to share her thoughts about family harmony. My cousin Jennifer, who I'd helped through her divorce just last year, sent a long email about how disappointed she was in my stubbornness. The word selfish appeared in every message, like they'd all received the same script. But it was the silence from my father that hurt most. He'd always been passive in our family dynamic, letting my mother direct the emotional weather, but I'd hoped he might finally stand up for me. Instead, he sent one text, just do what your mother wants, Sophie. It's easier, as if my life, my choices, my happiness were just obstacles to be managed for everyone else's comfort. My best friend Sarah found me crying in my car outside the wedding dress boutique, where I had an appointment. I'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, unable to go inside because Isabel was supposed to come with me. We'd made these plans months ago, back when I still believed she'd be happy for me. Sarah knocked on my window, her face creased with concern. I got your text, she said simply, sliding into the passenger seat. Tell me everything. So I did, every painful detail spilling out while rain started pattering against the windshield. When I finished, Sarah took my hand and squeezed it hard. Okay, she said. First, we're going in there and finding you the most beautiful dress in Portland. Second, we're going to have a glass of champagne. And third, you're going to realize that the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. The boutique smelled like lavender and possibility. The consultant, a woman named Marianne with silver hair and kind eyes, listened to my story while pulling dresses. "Oh, honey," she said, "I've been doing this for 30 years. You'd be amazed how many brides go through something similar. Family weddings bring out the worst in people sometimes." She brought me a dress that looked like moonlight and confidence, with delicate beading that caught the light like stars. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Sarah gasped and immediately started crying. "That's it," she whispered. "That's your dress." I stared at myself in the mirror, this woman who looked powerful and sure, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I could do this without my family's approval. Marcus and I decided to move forward with our plans, surrounding ourselves with chosen family instead of blood relatives. His parents flew in from Michigan, his mother immediately adopting me with a fierce protectiveness that made me cry with gratitude. "I always wanted a daughter," she told me over tea in our garden. "And now I have one who knows her own worth." Our friends rallied around us, taking on roles traditionally filled by family. Sarah became my maid of honor, throwing herself into the role with an enthusiasm that helped fill the hollow space where my sister should have been. Marcus's brother James offered to walk me down the aisle, joking that he'd been practicing his stern father face in the mirror. The photographer, a friend from college, promised to capture the love in the room, not the people missing from it. But even as we built this scaffold of support, the attacks from my family intensified. 2 months before the wedding, Isabel announced she'd chosen the same date after all. "Since you're being so stubborn," she posted on Facebook, "I've decided to have my engagement party that day. Family is invited to celebrate with us at the Fairmont Hotel." The comments flooded in immediately, relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly very concerned about supporting poor Isabel during this difficult time. My mother added her own comment, "So proud of my daughter for taking the high road. Those who truly love our family will be there." The subtext was clear as glass: "Choose Sophie, and you're out." I found out about the post from my cousin David, one of the few family members who'd remained neutral. He called me at work, his voice careful. "Sophie, I think you should know what's happening on social media." I put him on speaker so Marcus could hear too. My office door locked against interruptions. As David read the comments aloud, each one felt like another brick in the wall my family was building between us. "I'm sorry," David said finally. "This is cruel, even for them." I stared at the architectural plans spread across my desk, buildings designed to shelter and protect, and wondered why my own family seemed determined to tear me down instead. The conversation with David revealed something else. Isabel had been planning this for weeks. She'd toured venues, sent save the dates to extended family, even hired the band I'd mentioned wanting for our reception. "She asked me last week if I knew your colors," David admitted reluctantly. "I thought she was trying to coordinate as a bridesmaid. I should have known better." My hands went cold as the full scope of her plan became clear. This wasn't just about competing dates anymore. She was systematically copying every detail of my wedding she could discover, turning my carefully planned day into her engagement party theme. Marcus found me in the garden that evening, pulling weeds with a violence that probably worried the vegetables. "We could elope," he said gently, kneeling beside me in the dirt. "To Hawaii. Get married on a beach, with just us in the sunset." I sat back on my heels, considering the idea had appeal. Escape the drama, avoid the confrontation, take the path of least resistance my father had always advocated. But as I looked at Marcus, dirt smudged on his cheek from where he'd brushed away my tears, I realized that running would feel like letting them win. "No," I said firmly. "We're having our wedding, our way, with people who actually love us." He smiled then, proud and a little sad. "That's my warrior," he said. "Let's give them a wedding to remember." 3 weeks before the wedding, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photo of Isabel in a wedding dress, my wedding dress. Not a similar style, not inspired by, but the exact dress I'd chosen, down to the custom beadwork I'd requested. A note in my mother's handwriting said simply, "Isabel will look so beautiful at her party. Such a shame you can't share her joy." My hands shook so hard I dropped the photo, watching it flutter to the floor like a poisoned butterfly. Marcus found me an hour later, still standing in the kitchen, unable to process the cruelty of it. He picked up the photo, studied it, then very deliberately tore it into pieces and dropped them in the trash. "She can wear whatever she wants," he said. "It won't make her you." But the dress was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, relatives I'd invited began calling to awkwardly uninvite themselves. "You understand," my Aunt Patricia said, not sounding sorry at all. "Your mother is my sister. I have to support family." Each cancellation felt like another cut, death by 1,000 paper cuts of rejection. My Uncle Robert, who taught me to ride a bike and called me his favorite niece, sent a formal letter explaining that attending my wedding would be choosing sides, and he couldn't do that to my mother. The cousin whose wedding I'd coordinated 2 years ago texted that she had a work thing that suddenly came up. By the week of the wedding, my family side of the guest list had dwindled from 40 to 4, David and 3 distant relatives who probably didn't check Facebook. Sarah helped me rearrange the seating chart, her fury on my behalf almost comical if it hadn't been so touching. "We'll fill every seat with people who deserve to be there," she declared, calling friends and expanding plus ones. "Your family's loss is everyone else's gain." Marcus's mother called with daily pep talks, sharing stories of her own family drama to make me laugh. "My sister wore white to my wedding," she confided, "so I made sure the photographer didn't get a single good shot of her. 25 years later, she's still mad about it." These moments of support felt like life rafts in a storm of rejection. The Monday before the wedding, I made one last attempt at reconciliation, not because I thought it would work, but because I needed to know I'd tried everything. I called my father at his office, knowing he'd be alone. "Dad," I said when he answered, "I'm getting married on Saturday. Your daughter is getting married, and you're going to miss it because Mom and Isabel are throwing a tantrum. Is that really what you want?" The silence stretched so long, I wondered if he'd hung up. Finally, he sighed. "Sophie, you know how your mother is. When she makes up her mind about something." He trailed off, 40 years of capitulation compressed into an unfinished sentence. "I'm not asking you to change her mind," I said. "I'm asking you to be my father, to show up for me, just once." "I can't," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I can't go against your mother. You should have just changed the date. This whole mess is because you had to be stubborn." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "Stubborn?" I repeated. "Dad, I've spent my entire life bending over backwards for this family. I've accepted being forgotten, overlooked, pushed aside every time Isabel wanted something. The one time, I stand up for myself. I'm stubborn." My voice cracked on the last word. "That's not how I see it," he said weakly. "Then how do you see it?" I demanded. But he'd already hung up, choosing the silence of complicity over the discomfort of truth. Tuesday brought a new level of manipulation. Isabel posted photos from her engagement party dress fitting on Instagram, carefully cropped to hide the dress, but showing just enough to make it clear it was white, beaded, and elaborate. The caption read, "When you find the perfect dress, you just know. Can't wait to shine on my special day." The comments from family members gushed about how beautiful she looked, how excited they were for Saturday. My phone buzzed with screenshot after screenshot from friends who couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Is she seriously wearing a wedding dress to her engagement party?" Sarah texted. "Who does that?" But I knew who did that. Someone who'd been enabled her entire life to take whatever she wanted without consequences. By Thursday, the stress had manifested physically. I couldn't eat, could barely sumps Williams, and had developed a constant headache that no amount of medication could touch. Marcus forced me to take the day off work, something I never did. We spent it in our garden, him reading philosophy quotes about choosing peace while I pruned roses with perhaps too much enthusiasm. "The Stoics would say this is an opportunity," he said, looking up from his book, "to practice virtue in the face of adversity." I brandished my pruning shears at him. "The Stoics didn't have sisters who steal wedding dresses." He laughed, pulling me into his lap despite my dirt-covered jeans. "No, but they had Emperor Nero, which was probably worse." For a moment, sitting in our garden surrounded by the life we'd built, I could almost believe everything would be okay. That evening, David called with intelligence from behind enemy lines. "Sophie, I thought you should know. They're planning something for Saturday. I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Patricia about making a statement at their party. I don't know what, but it didn't sound good." I put him on speaker so Marcus could hear. "What kind of statement?" Marcus asked. David hesitated. I think they might try to crash your wedding, or at least send someone to check if you go through with it." Isabel kept saying something about consequences, and Mom was agreeing with her. The words sent ice through my veins. Were they really so invested in punishing me that they'd disrupt my wedding day? Sarah arrived an hour later with what she called the War Council. 3 of our closest friends armed with wine and righteous indignation. "Absolutely not," our friend Janet declared after hearing about the potential crash. "I'll personally stand guard at the door if I have to." Mike, who worked in security, started making actual plans for managing potential disruptions. "We'll have someone at each entrance," he said, pulling up the venue layout on his phone. "Any family member who shows up gets politely redirected." It should have been ridiculous, planning security for a wedding like it was a celebrity event. Instead, it felt like finally having an army of my own. Friday night, the rehearsal dinner became a celebration of chosen family. Marcus's parents hosted it at their hotel, transforming a generic conference room into something magical with lights and flowers and so much love I could barely breathe through it. His father made a toast that had everyone in tears. When Marcus told us about Sophie, he said he'd found someone who made him want to be better every day. Now that we know her, we understand why. Sophie, you've shown more grace and strength in these past months than most people manage in a lifetime. We're proud to call you our daughter. I ugly cried into my napkin while everyone applauded, feeling more seen and valued than I had in 37 years of blood family gatherings. As the evening wound down, I stepped outside for air and found Marcus's mother on the terrace, looking out at the Portland skyline. Can I ask you something? I said, joining her at the railing. She nodded, waiting. How do you let go of hoping they'll change? My family, I mean, some part of me keeps thinking they'll show up tomorrow, that they'll choose me just this once. She was quiet for a long moment, considering. I don't think you ever fully let go of that hope, she said finally, but you learn to love yourself more than you need their approval. You learn that their inability to see your worth says everything about them and nothing about you. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and safety. Tomorrow, you marry my son surrounded by people who see exactly who you are. That's what matters. I woke up on my wedding day to sunlight streaming through the windows, and Sarah already in my room with coffee and pastries. Happy wedding day, she sang, bouncing on the bed like we were teenagers, ready to marry the love of your life and show your ridiculous family what they're missing. I sat up, expecting to feel anxious or sad, but instead found an unexpected calm. You know what? I actually am. The morning unfolded in a blur of happy chaos, hair and makeup artists transforming my bridesmaids, Marcus's mother fussing over every detail, friends dropping by with cards and well wishes. Not once did I check my phone for messages that wouldn't come. The photographer, true to her promise, captured every moment of joy. Me laughing as Sarah tried to figure out the bustle on my dress. Marcus's brother James practicing his giving away the bride walk with exaggerated seriousness. The quiet moment when I put on my grandmother's necklace, the one family heirloom I had, given to me before she died because Sophie understands what really matters. Each photo would later tell the story of a woman surrounded by love, even if it wasn't the love she'd grown up expecting. An hour before the ceremony, Mike pulled me aside. We've got a situation, he said quietly. There's a woman in the parking lot who matches Isabel's description. She's in a white dress, sitting in her car, looking at the venue. My stomach dropped, but before I could respond, Sarah appeared at my elbow. Nope, she said firmly. We are not letting her ruin this day. Mike, can you and Tom handle it? Mike nodded, his expression professional. Already on it. She won't get within 50 feet of the ceremony. I should have felt guilty about having my sister turned away from my wedding, but all I felt was relief that my friends were protecting what my family had tried to destroy. The ceremony itself exists in my memory like a perfect snow globe moment. Walking down the aisle on James's arm, seeing Marcus's face when he first saw me, the way sunlight filtered through the trees at exactly the right moment. Our officiant, a philosophy professor colleague of Marcus's, wove together quotes about chosen family and building a life on solid foundations. When Marcus said his vows, his voice broke on the promise to stand beside you when the world feels against you, and I knew he understood exactly what this day meant beyond just our marriage. Sophie, he continued, steadying himself, you've taught me that real strength isn't about never bending. It's about knowing what's worth standing firm for. You've shown me that family isn't about blood or obligation, but about choosing each other every single day. I promise to be your family, your home, your safe place for all the days we have. I was crying before he finished, not caring about my makeup, just overwhelmed by being chosen so completely. When it was my turn, I looked out at our guests, friends who'd rearranged their lives to be here, Marcus's family who'd embraced me without question, mentors and colleagues who'd become my support system, and felt richer than I'd ever imagined possible. Marcus, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. They say you can't choose your family, but standing here today, I know that's not true. You choose family every time you show up, every time you listen, every time you love without conditions or scorecards. You've chosen me every day for 12 years, especially on the days when I couldn't choose myself. I promise to choose you back, to build our family on a foundation of respect and joy and terrible cooking experiments. The laughter that rippled through our guests felt like armor against any lingering sadness about who wasn't there. After the ceremony, As we took photos in the garden, Mike discreetly informed me that Isabel had left after sitting in the parking lot for an hour. She seemed to be waiting for something, he said. Maybe for you to come out and invite her in? When that didn't happen, she drove off. I processed this information while smiling for the camera, letting it wash over me without sticking. She'd made her choice, just as I'd made mine. The photographer captured what would become my favorite photo right after me laughing genuinely at something Marcus whispered. Surrounded by our wedding party, looking completely free, the reception unfolded like a dream I hadn't dared to imagine. Speeches that celebrated not just our love, but our resilience. Sarah's maid of honor toast included the line Sophie's family of origin might not recognize a treasure when they see one, but we do, and we're never letting her go, which got a standing ovation. Marcus's father, a quiet man who rarely spoke publicly, stood up to say, "In our family, we have a saying, love multiplies when divided." Today, we didn't just gain a daughter-in-law, we gained a daughter who understands that principle better than anyone I've known. Even our caterer, who'd become invested in our story during planning meetings, made sure every detail was perfect for the bride who deserves everything good. During dinner, I slipped away for a moment of quiet and found David on the terrace, looking conflicted. "I almost didn't come," he admitted. "The family pressure has been intense, but I kept thinking about all the times you've been there for me, and I couldn't miss this." We stood together watching the sunset, and he told me about the engagement party, how hollow it had felt, how Isabel had spent the entire time checking her phone and complaining that I'd ruined everything by not canceling my wedding. "She wore your dress," he said, quietly. It was disturbing, honestly, like she was playing bride at her own engagement party. People were uncomfortable, even if they wouldn't say it. Did anyone ask where I was? I found myself curious despite everything. David's silence was answer enough. Finally, he said, "Aunt Clara mentioned it once. Mom shut her down so fast." Everyone got the message. But Sophie, there were whispers. People asking each other if this was really about a wedding date or something deeper. I think some of them are starting to see the pattern. I nodded, unsurprised. It would take more than whispers to change decades of dysfunction, but at least the facade was cracking. Back inside, the dance floor was packed with people celebrating love triumphing over pettiness. Marcus's mother had requested the band learn a Polish wedding dance from her heritage, teaching everyone the steps with infectious enthusiasm. My boss surprised everyone with surprisingly smooth salsa moves. Even typically reserved colleagues let loose, creating a joyful chaos that felt like the antithesis of every stilted family gathering I'd endured. At one point, I stood at the edge of the dance floor, overwhelmed by the realization that these people had shown up not out of obligation but out of genuine care. Marcus found me there, pulling me into a slow dance despite the fast song playing. "You okay?" he asked, reading my face with the skill of 12 years together. "I'm perfect," I said, meaning it. I spent so many years accepting scraps and calling it a feast. I gestured at our friends laughing, his parents attempting to jitterbug, Sarah leading a conga line. "This is what abundance actually looks like." He spun me out and back, dipping me dramatically as the song ended. "Get used to it," he said. "This is your life now." As the evening wound down, Sarah organized the send-off she'd insisted on, despite my protests about tradition. Our guests lined up with sparklers, creating a tunnel of light for us to walk through. Halfway down the line, I spotted our venue coordinator wiping tears. "In 20 years of weddings," she told me later, "I've never seen a room so full of genuine love. Your people really showed up for you." They had in ways I was still processing. Each sparkler held by someone who'd chosen to stand with us. Each smiling face a rebuke to the idea that blood alone makes family. The last surprise came as we were leaving. The hotel manager approached with an envelope that had been left at the front desk. No name, just for the bride in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a card from my father's secretary, someone I'd known since childhood, but who'd kept professional distance. "Dear Sophie," it read, "I've worked for your father for 15 years and watched you grow from a determined young woman into someone remarkable. I couldn't attend officially, but I wanted you to know that some of us see you, value you, and celebrate your happiness, even if we can't say so publicly. Wishing you all the love you deserve and more, Patricia." Below the message was a crisp $100 bill and a note for your honeymoon fund. "Buy yourself something beautiful in a place where you're appreciated." That small act of rebellion from someone still trapped in my family's orbit meant more than any grand gesture could have. I tucked the card into my purse, a talisman of the fact that toxicity doesn't poison everyone it touches. Some people maintain their kindness despite the pressure to conform. Marcus read it over my shoulder, shaking his head. "Even your father's secretary knows what they're missing," he said. "Their loss, our gain. Our honeymoon in Costa Rica became a sanctuary for processing everything that had happened. For the first week, I'd catch myself checking my phone for messages that never came, some part of me still expecting my mother to break her silence with either apology or further attack. Marcus, patient as always, would gently take the phone and remind me we were here to build our future, not dissect the past. Slowly, between zip-lining through cloud forests and watching sunsets from our villa, I began to truly understand that their silence was a gift, the space to finally breathe without waiting for the next manipulation. On our last night, sitting on the beach with local beer and the sound of waves as soundtrack, I finally voiced what had been percolating all week. I want to write them a letter, I said, not to send, just to get it all out. Marcus squeezed my hand. Whatever you need. Back in our room, I filled pages with everything I'd never been allowed to say. How their favoritism had shaped me into someone who overachieved for crumbs of attention. How I'd spent decades making myself smaller so Isabel could shine brighter. How their conditional love had nearly convinced me I was only worthy when useful. Writing it felt like lancing a wound, painful but necessary for healing. The hardest part, I wrote, is that I still love you. Despite everything, part of me will always be that little girl desperate for her mother's approval, hoping her father will finally see her. But I'm choosing to love myself more. I'm choosing to stop auditioning for a role in a family that cast me as an afterthought before I could walk. Your inability to celebrate my joy has shown me who you really are, and while that breaks my heart, it also sets me free. I sealed the letter in an envelope, planning to burn it ceremonially when we got home. The act of writing it had already done its work. Returning to Portland felt like entering a new life. Word had spread through various social circles about what had happened, and the support was overwhelming. Clients I'd worked with for years sent congratulations and shared their own stories of family estrangement. Local coffee shop owner who'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine refused to let us pay for our lattes because chosen family needs to stick together. Even strangers who heard our story through friends of friends reached out with solidarity and encouragement. It was like discovering an entire underground network of people who'd chosen their own happiness over toxic family dynamics. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received an email from Isabel with the subject line, "Hope you're happy." I almost deleted it unread, but curiosity won. The message was a masterclass in manipulation disguised as concern. She wrote about how hurt everyone was by my selfishness, how I'd ruined her engagement by forcing her to plan an event the same day, how our mother cried every night about her lost daughter. The projection was so absolute, it almost impressed me. She'd literally worn my wedding dress to compete with my wedding, yet somehow I was the villain for not capitulating. The saddest part, her email concluded, is that you've chosen a man over your family. When Marcus leaves you, and he will, they always do, don't come crying to us. You've made your bed. I read it aloud to Marcus, who listened with raised eyebrows. She really believes this narrative, doesn't she? He said. In her mind, you're the aggressor and she's the victim. I forwarded the email to Sarah with just LOL as commentary. Her response was immediate. The delusion is strong with this one. Also, jokes on her. You've got a king-sized bed with 1,000 thread count sheets. You're doing just fine in the bed you've made. A month later, the real shock came. David called to report that my parents were struggling financially. Apparently, they'd spent a fortune on Isabel's engagement party, renting the most expensive ballroom at the Fairmont, flying in her college friends, hiring a designer to recreate elements from what they imagined my wedding would be. They maxed out credit cards, David said, disbelief clear in his voice. Mom justified it by saying they were showing everyone what a real family celebration looks like. Now they're hinting about borrowing money from relatives. The irony was razor sharp. They'd bankrupted themselves trying to upstage a wedding they'd refused to attend. But here's the kicker, David continued. Isabel and Ryan broke up 2 weeks ago. Turns out he wasn't comfortable with the whole wearing a wedding dress to an engagement party thing. Said it showed troubling priorities. So now Mom and Dad are stuck with debt from a party celebrating a relationship that no longer exists. I shouldn't have felt vindicated, but I did. The universe had delivered poetic justice without my lifting a finger. Marcus, listening on speaker, shook his head. They created their own Greek tragedy. All that effort to hurt you, and they only destroyed themselves. As fall turned to winter, life settled into new rhythms. Without the constant anxiety of managing family expectations, I discovered reservoirs of energy I hadn't known existed. My work flourished. The affordable housing project won a city award for innovative design. Marcus's book hit local bestseller lists, with strangers stopping him to share how his philosophy of chosen family had resonated. We hosted dinner parties in our home, filling the spaces my blood family had vacated with people who showed up consistently, celebrated authentically, and loved unconditionally. The holidays presented their own challenge. Thanksgiving had always been at my parents' house, with me cooking for days while Isabel arrived late to compliments and credit. This year, we created our own tradition. Marcus's parents joined us, along with what we dubbed the orphan crew, friends without local family or with their own toxic situations. Our table groaned under dishes from everyone's heritage. Sarah's Korean stuffing sitting beside Marcus's mother's Polish pierogi, my Vietnamese spring rolls next to Janet's soul food mac and cheese. The gratitude expressed around that table felt real in a way family holidays never had. I'm thankful, I said when my turn came, for learning that family isn't about shared DNA or childhood memories. It's about who shows up when showing up is hard. It's about who celebrates your wins without keeping score and holds space for your losses without judgment. Everyone at this table has taught me what family really means, and I'm grateful beyond words. Marcus's father raised his glass. To families of choice, he toasted, may they always be stronger than families of chance. The chorus of agreement that followed felt like a benediction. Christmas brought unexpected contact. My father called on December 23rd, his voice hesitant. Sophie, I wanted to see how you're doing. I let the silence stretch, refusing to make this easy. Your mother doesn't know I'm calling, he continued. But I've been thinking about what you said, about showing up for you just once. Hope flickered before I could stop it. And? I prompted. And I'm sorry, he said. The words seemingly pulled from deep reluctance. I should have walked you down the aisle. I should have been there. The apology felt hollow, arriving months too late. But I recognized it had cost him something to make the call. Thank you for saying that, I replied carefully. But Dad, apologies don't erase actions. You chose Mom and Isabel over me, just like you always have. One phone call doesn't change that pattern. He sighed heavily. I know, I wanted you to know I regret it. After we hung up, I sat with the complicated emotions his call had stirred. It wasn't enough, might never be enough, but it was an acknowledgement that what they'd done was wrong. Marcus found me in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Your father, he guessed. I nodded. Baby steps, he said. Or maybe just steps. You get to decide if they lead anywhere. New Year's Eve found us at Sarah's party, surrounded by the community we'd built. As midnight approached, she clinked her glass for attention. This year, she announced, we're doing something different. Instead of resolutions, we're doing recognitions. Each person names someone who made their year better. The room filled with appreciations, colleagues thanking mentors, friends acknowledging friends, chosen family celebrating chosen family. When Sarah pointed to me, I knew exactly what to say. This year, I learned that losing family can be a gift if it makes room for real love. Every person in this room proved that you don't need blood to build bonds that last. You showed up when my biological family showed their true colors. You celebrated when they tried to sabotage. You gave me the wedding of my dreams when they tried to turn it into a nightmare. Marcus, I turned to my husband. You stood by me when standing by me meant standing against them. That's the kind of love that builds a life on. The countdown started then, but I barely heard it over the group hug that engulfed us both. By February, the family situation had evolved in unexpected ways. David reported that my parents were barely speaking to each other, the financial strain of their failed power play creating cracks in their united front. Isabel had moved back home, her social media presence notably quiet after years of constant boasting. Extended family members who'd boycotted my wedding were reaching out to David, asking if I was okay, expressing regret for choosing sides. The narrative my mother had so carefully constructed was crumbling without my participation to maintain it. The thing is, David said, during one of our coffee meetings, without you to be the family scapegoat, they're turning on each other. Mom blames Dad for not controlling you better. Dad blames Isabel for the whole engagement party fiasco. Isabel blames everyone for Ryan leaving. It's like they need someone to be the problem, and without you, they don't know how to function. I stirred my latte, processing this information. That's exactly what toxic systems do, I said, recognizing the pattern from years of therapy. They need a designated patient to absorb all the dysfunction. Remove that person, and the system collapses. Valentine's Day brought another surprise. A package arrived with my maiden name and no return address. Inside was my grandmother's china tea set, the one my mother had promised me but never given, claiming it was too valuable for everyday use. A note in my Aunt Clara's handwriting said simply, your grandmother would want you to have this. Some things shouldn't be held hostage. I unpacked each delicate piece, remembering afternoons in my grandmother's garden, the only family member who'd seen me clearly. She'd be proud of you, the note continued, for having the courage she never did. I displayed the tea set prominently in our dining room, using it for Tuesday afternoon tea with Marcus. My grandmother had believed in using beautiful things daily, not saving them for occasions that might never come. Each cup of tea from her china felt like a blessing from the one family member who loved without conditions. Marcus learned to appreciate the ritual, the pause in our day to connect, and remember that beauty exists alongside struggle. March marked 1 year since the wedding that changed everything. Sarah insisted on an anniversary party to celebrate not just your marriage, but your freedom. What started as a small gathering became an event as more people asked to celebrate with us. The venue was our backyard, transformed with lights and flowers, and the first spring vegetables from our garden. The guest list read like a map of our chosen family: mentors, colleagues, friends who'd become siblings, Marcus's family who'd become mine. During the party, Marcus's mother pulled me aside. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "When Marcus first told us what your family was doing, I wanted to drive to Portland and shake some sense into your mother. How could she not see what a gift you are? But now, selfishly, I'm grateful. Because if they'd been the family you deserved, maybe you wouldn't have needed us as much. And Sophie, being your mother-in-law has been one of the great joys of my life." I hugged her through my tears, understanding finally that rejection can redirect us toward the love we're meant to find. The evening's highlight came when David arrived unexpectedly. "I can't stay long," he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. "The family would lose it if they knew I was here. But I needed to tell you something in person." He handed me an envelope. Inside were photographs from our childhood, ones where I was centered, smiling, clearly loved. "I've been going through old albums," he explained, "and I realized Mom curated the family history to minimize you. These are the photos she left out, the ones that show the truth. You were always bright, always trying, always deserving of more than you got." Looking through the photos felt like reclaiming erased history. There I was at 6, proudly showing an art project. At 10, winning the science fair while Isabel sulked in the background. At 15, surrounded by friends at a birthday party I'd forgotten because my parents had made it about Isabel's dance recital. "Thank you," I told David, meaning it deeply. I needed this." He squeezed my shoulder. "You're the strongest person I know, Sophie. And for what it's worth, some of us always saw it." He left quickly, but his visit felt like another crack in the family wall. As spring progressed, I found myself genuinely happy in ways I hadn't known were possible. Without the constant drain of managing toxic relationships, I had energy for joy. Marcus and I started hiking every weekend, exploring trails around Oregon. We took cooking classes together, laughing at our failures and celebrating small victories. I joined a book club full of fierce women who'd become another chosen family circle. Life felt expansive rather than defensive, creative rather than reactive. In therapy, I processed the grief that came with accepting my family would likely never change. "It's like a death," I told my therapist. "Except they're still alive, still choosing to exclude me, still painting me as the villain." She nodded with the wisdom of someone who'd heard similar stories. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop trying to earn love that should be freely given. You're grieving the family you deserved but never had. That's profound loss." The validation helped me sit with the sadness without trying to fix it. May brought Mother's Day, a holiday that had become complicated. Sarah organized a Mothers of Choice brunch, celebrating women who'd stepped into maternal roles regardless of biology. Marcus's mother was there, of course, along with mentors and friends who'd guided me through life. We toasted to the mothers who choose their children, and the children wise enough to choose their mothers. Later, alone in our garden, I wrote a letter to my mother I'd never send, thanking her for teaching me what not to do, for showing me how not to love. The 1 year mark of family estrangement passed with less fanfare than I'd expected. I'd imagined it would feel significant, but life had filled the spaces so completely that the anniversary slipped by almost unnoticed. It was only when David texted, "Thinking of you today. You made the right choice," that I realized the date. The fact that I'd forgotten felt like healing. My life was no longer defined by their absence, but by the presence of people who'd chosen to stay. Summer arrived with news through the family grapevine. Isabel was engaged again to someone she'd known for 3 months. "Mom's already planning another huge party," David reported. "She keeps saying this time will be done right since you won't be there to ruin it." The absurdity of the statement, that my absence was somehow necessary for family harmony, might have hurt once. Now it just confirmed the toxicity I'd escaped. Let me guess, I said. Another white dress situation? David laughed grimly. Actually, she's gone full princess this time. Think Disney meets Las Vegas. We shared a moment of humor over the escalating dramatics before moving on to happier topics. July 4th became another opportunity to create new traditions. We hosted a barbecue that sprawled across our backyard and into the evening. Watching fireworks from our deck, surrounded by chosen family, I felt profoundly American in the best way, free to pursue happiness, to create my own family structure, to reject systems that didn't serve me. You know what Independence Day really means now? Sarah said, slightly tipsy on sangria. It's the day we celebrate Sophie's independence from family bullshit. The cheer that went up made me laugh and cry simultaneously. As summer gave way to fall, I noticed the absence of family drama had created space for deeper healing. Without constant crisis management, I could examine the patterns I'd internalized. The need to overachieve for validation, tendency to apologize for existing, the assumption that love came with conditions. Marcus partnered with me through this work, gently pointing out when old habits surfaced, celebrating small victories of self-assertion. You didn't apologize once during that entire work presentation, he noted after one meeting. That's huge, Vic. September arrived with the second anniversary of our wedding approaching. This time I felt only gratitude for how events had unfolded. If my family had attended, would I have ever seen their toxicity clearly? Would I have continued accepting crumbs and calling it love? Their boycott had been intended as punishment but became liberation. As our anniversary weekend approached, we planned a quiet celebration, just us, renewing our private vows in the garden where we'd grown vegetables and grown stronger. The day before our anniversary, a card arrived from Patricia, my father's secretary. Dear Sophie, it read, 2 years ago, I watched your family implode over your wedding. I've now watched your father shrink into someone I barely recognize, weighed down by regret he won't voice. Your mother maintains her narrative, but fewer people believe it. Your sister cycles through relationships, looking for someone to fill a void that's not about romance. Meanwhile, every update I hear about you radiates joy. You won, dear one, not by fighting but by leaving the battlefield. Happy anniversary to you and Marcus. That evening, as Marcus and I prepared dinner together in our kitchen, I shared the card with him. It's strange, I said, chopping vegetables for our stir fry. I didn't set out to win anything. I just wanted to get married surrounded by love. He paused in his stirring to kiss my temple. That's exactly why you won, he said. You weren't playing their game. You were building your own life. They're still fighting battles while we're over here growing tomatoes and hosting dinner parties and loving each other. That's the ultimate victory. Our anniversary dawned clear and bright, the September air carrying hints of autumn. We'd written new vows, acknowledging the journey of the past 2 years, standing in our garden, surrounded by plants we'd nurtured and friends who'd become family. We renewed our commitment. 2 years ago, I said, looking into Marcus's eyes, I promised to choose you. Now I promise to keep choosing us. This life we've built, this family we've created, this love that expects nothing but gives everything. You helped me see that I deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. You stood by me when standing by me meant standing up to people who should have protected me. I love you beyond words. Marcus's vows made me cry again. Sophie, 2 years ago, your family tried to dim your light because it showed their darkness. But you don't dim, love. You shine brighter. You've turned rejection into redirection, pain into purpose, loss into liberty. I promise to keep being your soft place to land and your strong place to stand. I promise to tend our garden, both literal and metaphorical, with you. I promise that in our family, love multiplies when divided, and you'll never have to earn what's already yours. You kissed as our friends cheered, sealing promises that felt stronger for having been tested. The party that followed was everything our wedding reception had been, and more, joyful, genuine, filled with people who showed up because they wanted to celebrate us. Sarah made another toast, this time focusing on the future, to Sophie and Marcus, who proved that the best revenge is a life well lived. May the next 2 years bring even more joy, more chosen family, and more proof that walking away from toxicity is walking toward light. The applause felt like a benediction, blessing the path we'd chosen. Later that evening, as guests mingled in our backyard, David appeared again. This time, he stayed longer, seemingly more comfortable. You need to know something, he said, pulling us aside. Isabel's wedding is next month. Mom spent everything they have left on it. Dad's talking about selling the house. And here's the kicker. Half the family is declining their invitations. Apparently, Your wedding made people think about dynamics they'd ignored for years. The news should have brought satisfaction, but mostly I felt sad for the waste of it all. Energy, money, relationships, all sacrificed on the altar of my mother's pride. Are you going? I asked David. He shrugged. I haven't decided. Part of me feels obligated. Part of me is tired of obligations that only flow one way. He understood his dilemma intimately. Whatever you decide, I told him, make it based on what serves your life, not their expectations. You're allowed to protect your peace too. He hugged me then, the first time in years. You've changed, Sophie, in the best way. You're free. The word hung between us, accurate and profound. I was free in ways I was still discovering. October brought unexpected resolution with another family member. My Aunt Clara called, her voice tentative. Sophie, I owe you an apology. I chose family loyalty over what was right, and I've regretted it every day since. Your mother, she's not the sister I grew up with. This obsession with controlling everything, with Isabel being perfect while you're somehow never enough, it's toxic, and I finally see it. The conversation was awkward but necessary. Another brick removed from the wall between me and extended family. I don't expect forgiveness, Clara continued. I just needed you to know that some of us see the truth now. What they did to you was cruel. What you did in response was brave. I thanked her for calling, meaning it but maintaining boundaries. Apologies were welcome, but trust would take time to rebuild, if ever. After we hung up, I realized I felt lighter, not because I needed their validation anymore, but because truth has its own power, even arriving late. Halloween became another new tradition, with us hosting a costume party that brought out everyone's creative side. Marcus dressed as a philosopher king, complete with toga and crown of bay leaves. I went as an architect of dreams, covered in blueprint patterns and tiny model buildings. Our friends embraced the theme of who we really are, with costumes that reflected their essential selves rather than characters. Sarah came as a fierce protector, sword and shield representing her loyalty. The evening reinforced how much richer life had become without the drain of toxic relationships. As November approached, I found myself genuinely curious about Isabel's wedding, not from a place of competition or resentment, but with the detachment of watching a story that no longer featured me. David had decided to attend, promising full reports. I'm going as an anthropologist, he joked. Observing family dynamics in their natural habitat, his ability to find humor in the dysfunction showed his own growth, his own journey toward boundaries. The week of Isabel's wedding, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against better judgment, I answered. My mother's voice, aged by 2 years of sustained anger, filled my ear. Sophie, your sister is getting married this weekend. I waited, saying nothing. I thought you should know, she continued. Uncertainty creeping in. Thank you for telling me, I replied neutrally. I hope the day goes smoothly for everyone. The silence stretched before she spoke again. You really aren't coming. It wasn't a question. No, Mom, I'm not. That door closed 2 years ago when you chose to weaponize my wedding. I wish Isabel well, but we're not family anymore. Not in any way that matters.
You're so cold.
She said, falling back on familiar attacks.
We're your blood.
I took a breath, centered myself. Blood without love is just biology, Mom. You taught me that when you traded my wedding for Isabel's tantrum. I've built a family based on love, respect, and showing up. That's my blood now. I hung up before she could respond, my hands steady. Marcus found me standing by the window, watching our neighbor's children play. She called? I said simply. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. And you handled it perfectly. I'm proud of you. The pride in his voice matched my own. 2 years ago, that call would have destroyed me. Now it was just noise from a past I'd outgrown. Isabel's wedding day arrived with reports from David that felt like dispatches from another universe. The event was everything ours hadn't been, ostentatious, tense, filled with family members who attended out of obligation rather than joy. You should see Mom micromanaging everything, David texted. The photographer looks ready to quit. Dad's sitting in a corner looking miserable. Half the venue is empty because people didn't show. The photos he sent showed forced smiles and obvious gaps where extended family had declined to attend. The worst part, David called to report that evening, was the speech Mom gave. She went on about loyalty and real families and how some peoples choose selfishness over blood. Everyone knew she meant you. It was so uncomfortable, even Isabel looked embarrassed. Then she started crying about her lost daughter, and Dad had to escort her out. The whole thing was a disaster. I felt sympathy for the guests who'd endured such manipulation, but no regret for missing it. My absence had protected my peace while highlighting their dysfunction. That night, our house filled with friends for what we dubbed Anti-Wedding Saturday, a celebration of chosen family and healthy relationships. We'd cook together all day, preparing comfort foods from various cultures. The laughter that filled our rooms was genuine, the connections authentic. At one point, Sarah raised her glass. To Sophie, who 2 years ago showed us all that sometimes the best gift your biological family can give you is their absence. And to all of us who've built something better in that space. The toast felt like closure, acknowledging the pain while celebrating the growth. As December arrived, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. What had begun as devastating betrayal had transformed into profound liberation. My work had flourished without the constant need for family validation. My marriage had deepened through weathering the storm together. My circle of chosen family had expanded and strengthened. Even my physical health had improved, the chronic stress-related symptoms disappearing once I stopped trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The holidays approached with joy rather than dread. No more performing happiness at family gatherings where I was tolerated rather than celebrated. No more cooking for days while Isabel received praise for store-bought contributions. No more silent nights wondering why I was never quite enough. Instead, we had traditions that nourished rather than drained, celebrations that included rather than excluded, love that expanded rather than contracted. Christmas Eve found our house full again, the orphan crew grown larger as word spread about our inclusive celebrations. Marcus's parents had made it their permanent holiday tradition, his mother teaching everyone to make Polish Christmas cookies. We'd established a white elephant gift exchange with a twist. Gifts had to represent growth or healing from the past year. The thoughtfulness of what people brought, journals, plants, books about boundary setting, spa certificates for self-care, showed how deeply this community understood each other. You know what I'm most grateful for, I asked Marcus as we cleaned up after everyone left. That our future children will grow up in this, surrounded by people who love unconditionally, who show up consistently, who celebrate rather than compete. They'll never wonder if they're enough because everyone around them will show them they're already everything. He paused in drying dishes to kiss me. When you're ready, he said, we're going to be amazing parents. Because you know exactly what not to do, and more importantly, you've learned what real love looks like. New Year's Eve arrived with reflection rather than resolutions, grown beyond the person who needed fixing, who made lists of ways to become worthy of love. Sitting with Sarah and Janet on our deck, watching fireworks light up the Portland sky, I felt profound contentment. You know what's wild? Janet said. 2 years ago, you were apologizing for existing. Now you're this force of nature who knows her worth. It's like watching someone emerge from a chrysalis. Sarah agreed, except you built your own chrysalis by walking away from people who kept you small. That takes guts most people don't have. As midnight approached, Marcus found me on the deck. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, pulling me close. I'm thinking about time, I said. How 2 years can feel like a lifetime when you're really living instead of just surviving. How rejection can be redirection. How losing a family that never really saw you can help you find people who do. I'm thinking that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He smiled. That soft smile that still made my heart skip. Me too, he said. Exactly where we're supposed to be. The clock struck midnight, and our friends cheered, but I barely heard them. I was too busy being present in this life I'd built from the ashes of other people's expectations. Every loss had led to greater gain. Every closed door had revealed open windows. Every act of choosing myself over their dysfunction had led to this moment, surrounded by authentic love, built on mutual respect, sustained by people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. This is our family, I whispered to Marcus as our friends hugged and laughed and welcomed another year. These people who choose us every day. This is what I was looking for my whole life without knowing it. He nodded, understanding perfectly. And we choose them back, he said. That's what makes it real. As I look back now, 6 months after that second anniversary, 8 months after Isabel's disastrous wedding, 2.5 years after my family showed me who they really were, I feel nothing but gratitude. They gave me the gift of their absence, the push to find my real tribe, the freedom to build relationships based on love rather than obligation. Their rejection redirected me toward a life I couldn't have imagined when I was still trying to earn their approval. If you're reading this because your own family has chosen sides against you, because blood has demanded loyalty while showing none, because you've been painted as the villain for having boundaries, know this: their inability to love you properly says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. You deserve family who shows up because they want to, not because they share DNA. You deserve love without conditions, support without scorecards, and relationships that energize rather than drain. The path to chosen family isn't easy. There will be holidays that hurt, milestones they miss, moments when the absence aches like a phantom limb. But on the other side of that pain is freedom to be yourself fully, to love without fear, to build relationships on foundations of mutual respect rather than obligatory connection. Every person who truly sees you is worth a dozen who look through you. Every chosen family member who celebrates your joy is worth 100 blood relatives who resent your happiness. My mother was wrong about one thing above all. Marcus didn't leave. The people who really love you don't leave when things get hard. They stand closer. They build walls around you when you're too tired to protect yourself. They remind you of your worth when family of origin tries to convince you that you have none. They become your family in every way that matters, proving daily that love is a choice, not an accident of birth. So to those still trapped in toxic family dynamics, still trying to earn love that should be freely given, still making yourself smaller so others can feel bigger, you have permission to choose yourself. You have permission to walk away from tables where respect isn't served. You have permission to build your own family from people who see your light and want to help it shine brighter. It's not selfish. It's not cold. It's the warmest thing you can do. Choosing love over blood, respect over relation, peace over performance. My name is Sophie Williams. I'm 47 years old, married to a man who sees me clearly and loves me completely. I'm surrounded by chosen family who show up consistently and celebrate authentically. I built a life that toxic blood relatives tried to destroy, and in trying to punish me, they set me free. If you've experienced family betrayal, if you've been labeled difficult for having boundaries, if you're wondering whether blood really makes family, I see you. You're not alone. And from someone who's walked through that fire and emerged not burned but forged, it gets so much better when you stop trying to be enough for people who've already decided you're too much. Thank you for reading my story. If it resonated with you, if you've walked a similar path, or are considering taking those first steps away from toxicity, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share where you're watching from, what brought you here, what your own journey with chosen family looks like. Subscribe if you want to be part of a community that understands that sometimes the family you find is infinitely more valuable than the family you're born into. We're building something here, a space for people who choose love over obligation, growth over stagnation, and their own happiness over other people's comfort. Remember, you are worthy of love that doesn't require you to shrink. You deserve family who celebrates your victories without keeping score. You have the right to protect your peace, even from people who share your DNA. Blood makes relatives, but love makes family. Choose accordingly.